This is So Fail, So Good, the podcast that changes the way we talk about failure from women who've lived through it and learned. Today on the show, we have Brandyn Negri. Brandyn is the founder of Live Your Yes, a coaching platform that works with career professionals and business owners to help them overcome obstacles that get in the way of growing their business and careers. Brandyn is my business coach and has truly changed my life, so I'm a little biased. Brandyn has a heart of gold and has challenged me in the best way possible. But before Brandyn found coaching, her path was filled with major challenges, disappointment, and failure. She opens up about the most difficult moments in her life and how she found the resilience and humility within to drive her purpose forward. Okay, on to the show. Hi, Brandyn.
Good afternoon.
So happy you're here today. We go way back, obviously, and you've had such a big impact on my life, and I'm just so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful to be here.
It's
nervous
gonna be
and excited.
So we'll dive right in. What was your first ever job? First paycheck? First time you actually felt like, oh, look, I'm making a living?
Well, my first job ever was at a local Mexican restaurant in Princeton, Indiana called Taco Tierra.
Ooh.
And I was the dish cleaner.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I was 16.
How long did you stay there?
For a few months.
Yeah. That's humbling. I would guess,
humbling.
washing dishes.
Yes.
So you mentioned Indiana, and that's where you grew up.
Yes.
And so where did you go after Indiana? Did you stay there for college? What was next?
So I moved away from Indiana in 1994. Followed a boyfriend to the south. Went to Sarasota, Florida. I was in college at the time. And upon my arrival to Sarasota, made a decision to sit out of college for a year to gain residency. And got a job in the real estate business. Actually learned how to close real estate loans working at a title company.
Awesome. Okay, and that was in Sarasota.
Correct.
And that's your first sort of step into real estate, and then you moved into luxury real estate pretty quickly after that?
Well, my first step into real estate was actually in Indiana. I started working on closings there as a means to pay for school. And then I got into selling real estate for a luxury company in Sarasota. Gosh, I would say that was probably around 1996, 97. And at that time, I'm pretty confident to say I was the youngest person by at least 20 years.
Wow.
At this firm.
Okay. That's quite a big age difference.
It is. And I could be a little bit, it could have been like
right.
15 years.
But it felt like 20.
Yes.
Yes. So you start making money there? Like, is it a good career? Are you thinking, well, this is kind of, I found my place? Or does it feel just like kind of like a stepping stone to what's next?
I've definitely found my place. Within the first year, I was closing $3 million in gross revenue, which at the time, in order to even find business, someone who's not from there, you're looking in the for sale by owner ads in the newspaper. Technology that wasn't even a thing back then. So I knew I had real potential after my first year and was encouraged by my mentor and the people I worked with. This is definitely something you need to stay in. So I did not go on to nursing school at USF in Tampa. Okay.
So you meant, I mean, how old are you right now when you're closing $3 million deals? Like, you must be thinking,
24
wow.
to 26. Yeah. So
that's a fun taste of like, okay.
First taste of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the first time I actually was like, wow, I'm making money that I've never touched before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's looking good. Like, you're making money, you're young, you're having fun, you're in Florida. And then you start your own brokerage, right? So tell me about that.
Okay, so I came up with the genius idea one day that I wanted to start selling houses that were more expensive. which made sense. If I'm going to spend all this time selling real estate, why not increase my average sales price? The genius idea was I was going to start my own brokerage because my thinking was, why would anyone hire me at this firm when all of these other top agents have been here? They would hire them. So I wanted to diversify. So I started my own business called Brandyn and Co. I was Brandyn and Co. and secured a luxury developer as a client. And that was the turning point and introduced me into a different echelon of price bracket that I had never touched before.
So when you're working with a developer, I mean, just for people that don't understand, I mean, he or she will be has a big building, and then they need you to sell all the units within it. So big potential.
Yeah, down there it was spec homes on the waterfront.
Oh, okay.
So they were building. I think the first property I closed for them it's like $3 million or something like that. And then they had like their top property was right under $6 million. So yeah, it's real. It's real money. It's kind of life-changing money at that point. But the stakes are higher in that when you walk into luxury real estate market, you're also spending a lot of money to market the property with the risk you might not ever get it back. So it's not all just glory looking on one side. It's actually, there's quite a bit of an investment from the agent's perspective leading up to that.
And at some point now you meet a business partner. Sounds like you're getting bigger. Like, you know, what happened with this partner and how did you meet him?
So I connected with a really smart guy at the old firm that I had worked for and approached him and said, hey, things are going really well. Would you ever want to partner together? And at that point, and he said yes. And at that point, what we did, we felt the opportunity was innovating the brokerage market or the brokerage model versus just running with the wind and selling a bunch of luxury real estate properties. So we innovated the brokerage model, relaunched the name of the business at that time. It was called Sky Real Estate, and launched again, and then just started recruiting agents and continuing to focus our energies in the luxury market. So fast forward after we launched, I'd say it was probably less than 2 years, we caught wind that Sotheby's, which is a world-known name in the auction, they auction fine and expensive things, that Sotheby's partnered with Cendent Corp at the time, which is now Realgy. And they basically said, hey, we're going to take this brand, Sotheby's, and we're going to franchise it into real estate. And the broker in our market, who we both used to work for, she was the one who was affiliated with them. And they basically went to her first and said, we'd love to offer you this opportunity to franchise. She chose not to. And we then applied for it. Long story short, we were picked.
Awesome.
And at that point, it was a game changer for our business. It opened doors up very quickly for us because of the name. We relaunched our business again. And then we started growing our business and opening multiple locations within the Sarasota County area. So I was no longer selling and brokering. I was just brokering and recruiting and opening offices.
And so for most people, when they think of the Sotheby's, they think of like a kind of a high-end, really beautiful real estate company. And I know it's very popular worldwide now. So just to kind of clear it up here. So basically at that time when you took on as one of the first franchises, it sounds like, you guys were taking it from just the brand name of these auction house to we're going to tie that to real estate.
That is correct.
Okay.
And in our market, it was known because that broker who was affiliated with it, she was listing very high-end properties, and those properties were quote-unquote affiliated with the brand. So people it wasn't brand new to our market, but us actually having the name, that was big news.
The name ties it to, right, like if you want to think of luxury and high-end, you're going to have the Sotheby's name.
Yes.
And now you have that access.
Exactly.
Okay. And so, but all the while this is happening, and I might have my timing wrong, but at this point, you're in need of a kidney transplant too. So you've got some personal stuff going on and you're working your tail off, it sounds like. What was that like to try to manage that, like a big health issue right in the middle of this like business expansion?
It was almost a pain in the ass, to be honest with you, because in my head, I was too busy to deal with a kidney transplant. We were, I loved the business growth. I loved the challenge of it. But the reality was, I felt tired all the time. I'd say that was the real side effect that I experienced. And I have a genetic kidney disease, and I knew at that time transplant was going to be in my nearer future, and nearer future meaning, I think about that time it was like 3 years. So it's just more of like the awareness of it versus, oh shit, this is happening tomorrow. I was more of like looking forward to, okay, what are the next steps for me?
And now it sounds like in business, it's growing. You've got this sort of in the back of your mind.
Yep.
There was an opportunity to move to Minnesota, right?
Correct.
Tell me about that and how maybe the transplant or other life factors might have played into your move here.
Okay. So snapshot of that time, we were growing faster than we could keep up. Between the two of us, capital, at that time in my personal life, I was separated. I knew my kidneys were failing. I was in therapy. It was just a ton. And one day I discovered that my business partner and his brother, who lives in the Twin Cities, bought the franchise rights to Sotheby's, and with the plan of replicating our brokerage model in the Twin Cities market. This came at a real shock to me because of the factors I just described. But came up to Minnesota. First time ever. I had no idea where Minnesota's even located, quite honestly. And was intrigued by the opportunity here. I loved the area, the vibe, the feel was good. My partner's brother is super nice. Long story short, we were all talking and they said, hey, why don't you come up for the year? Launch the business, see how it goes. And for me, it seemed like a really good life step for me, knowing the transplant was in the near future. The hospitals are great here. My separation was leading to divorce. And it just seemed to make sense to have a female also as the CEO of a business in a major corporate market. So there were just a lot of things that went into the decision, but ultimately I chose to move here. So I moved here in the summer of 2006. At that time, we had secured an office. We had secured a top agent. We had an investor who is a Minnesotan. The stars were lined up. And I'd say it was a couple of months into me being here, we found out the investor pulled out. Our build out for our location was slower. The realtor that we had signed, he pulled out, and things weren't looking so good. And long story short, we chose to persevere and not pull out of the market. We found an investor who knew us in our Florida market, or from our Florida market, I should say. That divvied up the ownership quite heavily. So things started changing real quick. And I had to recruit kind of from the ground up. And in this market, in the Minnesota market, Sotheby's wasn't like a thing. I would say the clientele here were a lot more reserved. Didn't necessarily need a sign in their yard that said, oh, this is luxury. They were more understated, if I haven't already said that. But so yes, I had my work definitely cut out for me.
Okay, so at least you move here in the summer. That's the good news.
Exactly. I had never been here in the winter, so I had no idea.
So it's summer of 2006. You get, it sounds like the stars were aligning, and then you've got investors pulling out, and you're feeling like it's not exactly what you expected when you got here.
Right.
You're 15 years at this point into real estate and into this part of your career. And by anyone's measure, like a huge success. I mean, you're making a ton of
Yes.
money, and probably feeling on top of the world, a new fresh start.
Yes.
Okay, so once you're getting in the groove of things, it sounds like, although more challenging.
Correct.
What happens next? Like, what's the big sort of turning point? Yeah.
So this is the hard thing to wrap even my head around to this day. Within a 1-year period, so let's say, I launched the business in October of 2006. We were live. It was at the Guthrie. It was big public event. From October 2006 to October 2007, I had a kidney transplant at the Mayo Clinic, most amazing place in the world. I met my boyfriend, Mario, who was my kidney donor, now my husband. And I was bought out of the real estate business and signed a non-compete and confidentiality. So it forced me to literally do nothing and start over.
Wow. That's a lot in 1 year.
That is a lot.
Oh.
And I have finalized my divorce and truly started over financially. In that whole process, I made a choice to no longer go after marital assets. So just a clean slate because I had my business. And then I was bought out of my business for basically a year's pay. And that came at a real surprise, but it was a choice I made. And so after all of that, it left me feeling financially depleted, emotionally completely confused. I didn't know what the word grief was. I didn't know what that meant because in my heart and my head, I was like, how can I feel? How could I feel this way knowing I just got a gift of life from such a selfless human being? And so it was a really dark place in my life to show up with a smile on my face when people would ask me how I was doing. And then to go home and feel like I had nothing inside. It was really hard.
Take all the time you need. I mean, it sounds like identity was a thing here that's just a strong feeling of where am I now? Who am I now? That whole life is sort of behind me. And you're starting over like in a lot more ways than just one, right?
Yeah.
You've gotten this kidney transplant. It is feeling like a new life and a new partner. And it sounds like a crushing time. What sort of like those days after, if you can remember what that felt like, and just maybe walk me through that like stage in your life, and what it took to the healing that came after that.
Yeah. What it felt like was getting up into a familiar, like the routine of you wake up, we get ready, like I would get ready for my day, and I would just drive around with nowhere to go. And so those are humbling moments.
Yeah.
But, in those moments too, there's something so deep inside of me that knew, I was like, you have a choice here. You can choose to check out from your life, or you can choose to get stronger and heal and see that God has something else in mind for me and have hope. And so that's what I chose. Every day it felt a little bit better, but it was hard not talking to people that worked for me, to be able to tell them what happened. It's truly being humble, like just letting my actions speak for themselves and hope that people would see and see something more than what I could tell them in words. So yeah, But how I also got through this was the practice of yoga. I used to be a big runner. And after the transplant, if you don't know much about kidney transplant, the transplanted kidney is put in the front side of your body. So I was cut open in the front midsection of my body. And so I couldn't run. Mm-hmm. So I started practicing heated power yoga. I loved it. Mm-hmm. I went to Core Power and I thought it was the best thing ever because it gave me that high of running, but then this like other side I'd never felt before, which is just this calming, relaxing feeling. And I was surrounded by people, honestly, I think for the first time in years, that didn't ask me about what I did, where I lived. People were just genuinely interested to know, well, where are you from? What do you like? It wasn't about the same questions. Right. And that stood out as unique to me. Yeah. So I started practicing yoga and I loved it. And I had time on my hands. So I did a yoga teacher training. And wow, is that humbling. The teachers make it look way easier than it is when they're standing up there and teaching. And that was my first reality check of starting over. And I'm like, don't you know who I am? Like, I've built businesses and you're giving me feedback on a cue and a yoga. Like, it was so humbling. Right. But I needed, like, that was a great thing. I needed to be humbled in that way to grow again. And so anyway, absolutely fell in love with it and then started teaching. Well, I started teaching on the rooftop of where my husband or my boyfriend at the time and I lived, but I never like went into a studio and taught. I just was like, great, I'm opening a yoga studio.
Like, you're opening a yoga studio.
Isn't that the next step?
So you probably, okay, so you get your teacher training license. You get your license and just naturally, because you are an entrepreneurial mind, you're probably sitting there thinking, well, I could do this or I could do it better, likely, usually like pointing out the things that are just missing, efficiency, those things like that. So at what point, like what year are we at post?
Okay, so we're in 2008, summer of 2008.
Okay, summer of 2008, you decide I'm going to open a yoga studio.
Yes.
And how are you going to pay for that? How are you going to, I mean, I know.
Yeah.
And how are you?
Great question.
Even just, are you thinking, do I need a partner? Like, what's next?
So, yes, money is always a part of it, isn't it? So I had a little bit of money left over from the buyout. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, this is enough money to pay rent, get it started. My boyfriend, Mario, at the time was like, this sounds like a reasonable idea. He's like, I'll go in with you on it. I'll help support you. So that's how financially it all came together. And
how'd you even find a space?
So just started kind of from my real estate, I guess, intuitiveness. Just we drove neighborhoods and we found what we thought was a really great spot in South Minneapolis and found a space to rent, a great landlord who understood our vision and was willing to work with us on the build out for a heated yoga studio.
And what did you name the yoga studio?
So we named it Sai Yoga Plus Boutique because I also wanted to sell retail stuff in there.
Sai Yoga Boutique. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so now you own a yoga business.
Yes.
And that's a huge change from real estate. What do you remember like loving about it? And what do you remember being challenging during those years?
What I loved about it was working alongside Mario because we're both different. So I loved learning from him. I loved the creativity aspect of it and finding our own novel way of creating Sai. And I loved the people. I mean, truly the people that walk through the doors. Like I know a ton of them still to this day. Mm-hmm. So I loved helping people and supporting people and building something new to me was called building community. Mm-hmm. Never even heard of such a thing.
Right.
So building community and that was pretty cool.
It's emotional.
Brings back a lot of memories.
To go through our life story and like the hard times that you look back on and say, ultimately, maybe it wasn't exactly what panned out in your mind, but there's still so many joyous moments.
So many good. Yeah, there are tears of like good. It's good stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you do this. You've opened your own yoga studio with Maria, with your partner. Like, that sounds so fun. But also, I mean, working with someone, with family, with a close friend, we know that can all be challenging. So I know you mentioned to me when we talked before just about the boutique side of things and wanting to bring clothing in there and sell things. Like, what did you face there? And what were the challenges?
Well, the coolest thing about the boutique was I met Fote Design. And Kaya Fote is a good friend of mine and her sister Zoe, and being connected to their mission of recycling fabric and clothes. And so I loved working with them. I just loved connecting with brands who were committed to the environment and doing things to support our earth and local business. That to me was just exciting and fun that way. And we did try our best to carry a lot of local stuff. And we partnered with Lululemon. At the time, they had just one little store here. The challenge that came with it, and you asked me earlier just about the challenge of the business, we were pioneers. We didn't have anyone consulting us on, here's how much square footage you devote to a yoga room. You need this many mats to make money, kind of thing. And we devoted most of our space to the retail check-in and locker rooms. And so the challenge was we had all this money invested in inventory and we couldn't sell it fast. Like, we couldn't get rid of it, right? Because when people are coming out of a hot, sweaty yoga room, the last freaking thing they want to do is put on clothes. And then Lululemon, as a partner of ours, then they started opening stores here. And so it's way more cooler and fun to go to their store and look at all their clothes. So that started not working. So I would say just learning how much square footage to put in the business and where, that we learned a lot financially that way. I think the other challenge too in the model at the time was the way the model worked was the teachers were independent contractors. And so the way the industry kind of works, it's hard to be a yoga teacher as a full-time job and financially make ends meet. And so always having to work and accommodate multiple people's schedules constantly. The schedule is just, if you know anything about that, it's one of the most challenging, can be one of the most challenging things.
Yes, I certainly can relate from my Yogaloo days. And one of the biggest challenges was the instructors and being able to, just things end up happening, right? People don't show up sometimes. And then maybe you aren't certified in that certain thing they're teaching, and you got to get somebody in there to teach because you have people showing up. So
yeah, Mario was put in some really hilarious spots because he did not teach. He was behind the scenes.
Sure. And he's out there saying, well, I can try to lead us today through this power flow class. Oh, gosh. Okay, so it's was it 4 years?
So our lease was for 4 years. And the transition that started our way out of let's say the yoga studio, did I learn a lot about my leadership at this last year. This is when hindsight, if you could go back and do it again. Our last year in the business, we took a step back and we're like, okay, the revenue was just super spotty. We were constantly feeding the business financially. We had a really successful bar, like a bar program at the studio, but being the yoga person, I wanted it to be yoga. So I decided to no longer offer the bar classes. And about this time, I had been training under a world-known yoga teacher in the power yoga industry, and learned so much, was so inspired, and decided I was going to have all the classes on the schedule, this power vinyasa style. So when I made that decision and told everyone, the yoga teachers, a lot of people were like, you know what, good for you, but we're out. the style was pretty scripted. The sequence is set. And I lost some really good teachers, and I also lost a lot of members.
Really?
And that was like at the end of summer, and here we are on our last end of our lease.
Sure.
And I gave it my all right after that. I met some awesome students who decided like they wanted to step up and teach this way. But it was just too much of a hit. And so we kind of decided, all right, in the lease here, we couldn't expand the mat space and open another location so we can have more mat space. We would have walked away from our initial startup cost, which we didn't pay ourselves back. So we'd be outpouring more money and bet that this is going to work. Or do we say, you know what, we've endured a lot. Maybe it's time for us to move on and put the needs of ourselves first. And that's what we chose. And it was not, it wasn't at the time, it felt like a relief, but it was not an easy decision. I mean, this was in the works for months before we finally got to that point. And we're just like, we felt defeated. We're just like, the numbers aren't here. We've lost a lot of our great teachers, the members. We pissed a lot of people off, frankly. And I own that. It's just what you learn as I wasn't new in business, but I was new in that kind of business,
Again, humbling to just know, like, you don't know what you don't know. And you mentioned relief, and that to me resonates. And we've talked about this before on the podcast about there can be this dichotomy of feelings that when you decide something has an end point, it can feel super embarrassing and like, life-shattering, heartbreaking. You just feel so much in that negative side, but you can also feel like this, oh wow, that feels so good.
So freaking good.
Like there's a new light available or a new door that might open because it's taking you up so much time and energy and space in your life. And were you guys doing this together full time at this point?
We had been up until the second part of the last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you made this decision. It's time. Can you walk us through, because I know we probably have people, and I know I was in a position too where listening, thinking, I might be in that place too, but it is so hard from an identity perspective and from more so about what other people think. Right. And being able to admit, like, yeah, this didn't work. How did you have the courage to say, this isn't working and I'm going to let it go?
The numbers. I'll never forget the moment that it hit. We are now husband and wife, so we had just gotten back. Mara and I did from Mayo Clinic. It was my annual checkup. And every time you're there, for me, it is like reality comes right back, like health first, right? You're getting checked. Is everything okay? So we had come back home from Mayo. We were sitting in one of the bedrooms at our house, and I watched him transfer his paycheck into the business to make payroll. And I was sitting on the floor watching this, and I went, hey, you want to go? Let's go get a beer. And he's like, cool. So stopped doing that, got in the car, and on our way out to get a bite to eat, we had a head-on collision with a 210-pound buck.
Whoa.
And I knew, like, I was just like
a deer?
Yeah, it's huge. The antler, the rack was unbelievable.
Terrifying.
It was. And it was just, again, it was just like life. You're just at Mayo. It's just like, wake up. Life is too damn precious. And so the numbers didn't lie. And I don't know, for me, when at this point things felt a little different because I'd gone through a kidney transplant. And I'm like, this is nothing in the greater perspective of life. You tried. Did I give it my all? Yes. Did I make mistakes? Absolutely. But I'm a human being and I have my health and I can move forward.
And you probably, I feel like we actually read this at one point at the same time, but Brene Brown, she talks about being in the arena and, not being on the sidelines of life and just cheering and booing and judging, but instead being in the arena, living life, putting yourself out there, maybe falling over, being bloodied and scarred, and but getting back up. And what you're saying there is just like really bringing that to the front of my mind of like, I'm a human being, but at least I'm trying and I'm living.
Yeah.
And that's all really, I mean, that's a life well lived in my eyes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've thinking about this big picture at this point, you've made this decision with Mario on that drive. You're like, okay, life's too short. We got to put that to bed. And immediately, are you like, what's next? Or what did, again, those days that followed, what did that look like?
So, okay. So we closed the studio after telling all of our teachers and the staff. We had everyone over to our home. We told them to their faces because we really cared for everyone and their well-being. And so the what's next piece felt like an obligation I had already committed to. I was committed to going with the Africa Yoga Project to Nairobi, Kenya, that in April of the following year. And I was a part of a team assisting a yoga teacher training there for a month, and I was raising money to help pay for the group's program. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like I owed it to my commitment to keep teaching yoga because I considered, do I even want to teach? And I was like, no, this is the thing that will keep pulling me forward. And at that intersection in time, a studio where I teach today called Moto Yoga, it's a Canadian birthed franchise, the owners had opened. And my husband and I had met them, and they were like, they both called me and said, we love you. You already practice here. Please come teach here. And there was my next humbling moment where I wasn't the owner. I stepped into someone else's yoga studio and chose to teach for them. I'll never forget the first class. Their studio is double the size of mine, and it was filled. And the trembling that I felt inside of my body, it's humbling, but it was also freeing. And it made me realize, like, life just goes on.
Right.
You're either going to be on the train of it or you can sit over, back to the Brene quote.
Right.
Life just keeps going on.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. So I started teaching for Moto, and I went to Nairobi. I lived there for a month. I was brought to my knees spiritually, emotionally from being there, made my kidney transplant and everything else I thought I had a problem with, make me realize you're very privileged. You were brought here for a reason. Go home and keep doing what you're doing. And so it really inspired me to keep teaching yoga. And so with Moto, I received some great opportunities to be a part of their teacher training faculty. I met the founders at their teacher training program, and my eyes were widened to a world of activism and taking care of the world. And I just learned so much about so many things. And so it healed me in a different way. It's powerful.
You just have such an open mind, which I admire, and being open to new experiences, and feeling like a lot of grace for yourself too, right? Because you've now left the yoga studio behind, and you're on to teaching at Moto, which, by the way, that's where we first met.
Yes, it is.
You're the most amazing teacher. And so ultimately, you realize, though, it was in a class there that maybe coaching could be something that it like kind of perked your ears up a little bit.
Yeah. I had she's a friend of mine. She approached me. She knew of me of the real estate world. I don't know how that came out. But anyway, she said, hey, would you coach me? And it just threw me. And I was like, what do you mean? I don't coach people. And I came home, and was telling Mario about it, and he looked at me and he goes like, what the hell are you talking about? That's all you do is coach people. He goes, you just don't know it that way.
Right.
And so fast forward, I was like, do I want to do this again? Do I have it in me to ramp up a new brand, all of it? But I also was at this point with teaching that I was craving, like I wanted something more to, to add to teaching. And I wasn't sure what it was because it wasn't opening a studio. I kind of looked into it with Moto and it's just like, no, I don't have it in me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I started Live Your Yes, which is my coaching business. I started with this lady and I was completely honest. I was like, listen, I really don't know what I'm doing here, but if you want to come over to my house and we can start talking. And so that was 3.5 years ago.
Okay. I was just going to ask. Okay. So, I mean, again, there's just so much courage in that, in saying like trying another new avenue, right? It's, we're going from real estate to yoga to coaching and, new paths, and believing in yourself to say like, and the courage I guess the encouragement from Mario as well, which I think there's a lot of people in our lives that if it's not for them saying, what are you talking about? That's a strength of yours, or you can totally do that. Without that, sometimes we need those nudges. Yes. So all right. So you're on this new, almost third chapter, I would say. And so the first woman comes in, you have a conversation. At what point are you like, I think I'm going to do this and I'm going to make this legit. I'm sure there's some sort of kind of like training that goes into that too. And walk me through, like, first and foremost, you decided to pick yourself up back again and try again, which this is the resilience you have, Brandyn, is something that we all can learn from. So if you can just talk a little bit about your resilience and how you knew this was going to be legit, you're going to try it and do it for real.
I knew it was going to be legit the minute I said yes to that woman. I don't approach anything half-assed or half-hearted. When I say I'm in, I'm in. That's a good thing about me, and probably also a challenging thing about me. So I'd say like the big turning point for me was when I landed my first corporate account. And they gave me multiple people to coach. And so that was kind of like oh boy, you really need to kind of get a system in place versus a talking. Like you need a system. But when they rehired me after the first year, and I saw over a 1-year period, the shift in everyone's lives, that I was just there. I was like the catalyst. They did the work. I was just the one leading a little bit. So I take a tiny bit of credit, but they get the credit. So that was clear to me. Like, okay, you do have something. And I kept hearing, not only from my husband, who you could say, well, he's your husband, of course he's going to compliment you. He's pretty honest critic. But he would tell me this, and the owner of this company that hired me, they'd said, you know what, you have a gift. It's a gift. And I was just, even to this day, how do you, like, I don't know, maybe I do. I think we all have gifts, right? But maybe this was ultimately where I was supposed to be. The real estate, what I was great at in real estate was connecting to people. I love people's stories. I see possibility and love in people. Like it's something I can't describe. I coached the realtors in the yoga community. I was supposed to learn grace and humility and patience, meeting people where they are. I think it all came together, and it brought me to, wow, this is something that allows me to like bring all of my talents and gifts together. But I got to tell you, coaching's interesting in that it's super ambiguous process. So every time when I meet with clients, I'm always in my head. What are we going to do? How am I going to, right. It's just like, I never know where it's going to go. And that to me is vulnerable. It's like, I don't have a plan. I don't have a process. Like it is dropping everything that I think they should be or everything I know and moving them into what's in front of us in that very
Right.
moment.
The power of listening, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't go into those situations thinking, I'm going to solve all these problems
Oh,
for
my
you.
God.
But instead, just listening first and seeing, okay, something's going to trigger. I'm going to know what's next. But until you listen, you don't really know.
Well, yeah. And we live, me included in the we live in a to the next thing thing
Right.
society. What I have learned is so valuable is the listening. How many people sit in front of someone who will listen objectively to them? And it is the one gift. It's a gift. I'm like, someone's like, God, you're so honest. I get that a lot. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, why everyone should be honest, but no.
Right.
So listening is a gift.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So where is Brandyn Negri now? And what are you dreaming big about?
So, where I am now, I'm excited. I am partnering with some really smart and creative women here in the Twin Cities to host a retreat starting next year outside of the area. I get to be a part of that. I included myself. I inserted myself in. It's really neat. It starts in September. But basically, it's a program for North Minneapolis business owners. One of my friends is an attorney, and she gives legal advice, or her practice does, to business owners who would not normally be able to get that kind of advice. And I said, well, hey, can I coach them? Can I teach them about business stuff? And she's like, yeah, sure. So I get to do that. I think... Oh, and then the Twin Cities Startup Week, I'm doing a workshop for that. So more bigger audience stuff is starting to appear. And then the other thing I'm dreaming about is how I can make a better impact on our earth. And then how can my company, either through knowledge or workshops, the more I know about the global warming and our environment, the more I want to get involved. I don't know what that looks like, but that's really present for me right now. And to keep teaching yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And now where are you teaching yoga?
So I teach at Moto.
Teach at Moto.
Yeah.
The best. Okay. Last question for you, Brandyn. Hindsight is everything. Mm-hmm. It's so powerful. And knowing what you know now and where you are now, what advice would you give yourself when you were going through that feeling of failure and just like, I have no idea what's next? Can I pick myself back up? What advice would you have given yourself then?
I would have given myself the advice to not try to push so hard, to trust that everything will work out, and that I can like let go of that. And so I think the way I motivate without knowing I even do this, I have a really high bar of excellence. I grew up athletic. It's in my head still, the disciplined athlete. Oh, my goodness. Farmer, the whole deal. It's okay to slow down. It's okay to not know. And to wrap your arms around those low times, because they're not going to be around for long. So that would be it.
It's temporary, right?
It always is temporary. But God, in those moments, it feels like, shit, I'm done. I'm doomed.
Yeah.
But it is temporary.
Well, thank you, Brandyn.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. This is Twyla Dang. I am the CEO of Matriarch Digital Media, and I'm also the producer of So Fail, So Good. And this week, we're going to do things just a little bit differently. Our wonderful Laura is actually on maternity leave, and she is at home resting and enjoying her brand new beautiful baby. So this week's Did You Notice is going to be a little bit different. I am going to be delivering Laura's words to you today. So hopefully she is resting well and enjoying herself, and we're going to move forward. Did you notice how Brandyn talked about the act of humbling yourself after a failure? After we fail, it's a very easy time to get stuck, to feel consumed by it and start to look externally for answers. And what I admire so much about Brandyn was her choice during those moments and times of failure to go inward with grace and have faith in herself. It can be a lot easier to instead take an external mindset, pointing the blame and feeling righteous and resentful. Over and over, she used the word choice in our conversation. We can still be angry about a choice, but it is a choice nonetheless. And the best part? The climb out is a chance to reconcile a certain view of ourselves. Brandyn holds a level of self-awareness and perspective about her past businesses and life choices that I think we can all be striving for. She truly owns her story and everything that brought her to this point in her life. My resource for today is the quote that Brandyn and I touched on in the episode, the Teddy Roosevelt one that Brene Brown includes in her book, Daring Greatly. This quote has inspired me quite a bit and helped me through moments where I felt like keeping my big ideas down could be an easier path. Because, of course, sitting on the sidelines is most certainly easier than playing in the game. So on to the quote. It's a long one. I condensed it a bit, but bear with me. It is not the critic who counts, nor the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who comes up short again and again because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, who at the best knows in the end triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. So good. Love that quote. And what a beautiful way to end season 1. We have been on quite a journey together, guys, talking through all the shapes and sizes of failures and seeing the beautiful growth it can bring us. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate each and every one of you. I'm excited to keep bringing failure into the light where it belongs. And we're excited to follow Laura on her further journey. Thank you so much for your support in season 1. We can't wait to bring you season 2.
Thank you so much for listening to So Fail, So Good. If you want to know more about the show or today's guest, visit sofailsogood.com. This is a Matriarch Digital Media production. Executive producer Twyla Dang. And if you want to know more about Matriarch or other podcasts on the network, head to matriarchdm.com.